What is happening, Post Shifters? Welcome back to another episode of the Post Shift Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Shawn Soole. Absolutely loving it. It is my birthday today. I can say that. I was going to try and keep it like a little low key, but I'm doing all this Facebook stuff. I wish Facebook would fix this thing where I have my privacy, and this is why you always see me at the start of these shows to turn the privacy to public, because then it works on my other stuff, so my chat and whatnot, so you can see people can actually talk to us while we're doing it. And if it's not on public, it doesn't work. So if you ever wonder what I'm like fiddling with when I do my intros, that's exactly what I'm fiddling with. I've had to close down Facebook on my computer because all I get is notifications every 2 seconds because everybody's saying happy birthday. But I digress. Today I'm looking forward to it. I reconnected with Micah Dew from Maker's Mark, the Maker's Mark Diplomat for Western Canada, a couple of months ago for a Maker's Mark event. I can't believe it was a couple of months ago already. This year has gone way too quickly. It's almost December. And so I was like, oh, you know what? Like I gotta fill out some Canadiana content for the podcast. And I thought, what better way? And the cool thing is that Micah and I sort of trajectory wise went the same route when it came to starting our careers, because we both started our careers about the same time, and flair in the late 90s was very, very big. I blew out my left shoulder and then I dislocated a shoulder during a competition. So I was like, I'm just going to give up the flair from now on. Your backhand stall and your left shoulder pops out in the middle of a presentation. It's like, I think this might not be for me. But then we got into cocktails and everything else. So I'm really looking forward to it, because Maker's Mark has been not dormant in Western Canada over the last couple of years, but just the boom of bourbon, not having enough product to actually sort of push it hard. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation about where Micah got to start. Flair tending, because it's still a massive thing. I know cocktail nerds listening are going to be like, yeah, is flair still a thing? I'm going to go, yes, flair is still a very, very big thing. So Micah, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Shawn.
So you're in Calgary right now. Is this one of your first trips away, isn't it?
This not one of my first trips to Calgary in a while, and that's one of the interesting things about getting back on the road and getting a chance to connect to different communities across the country. Is you go, oh, I haven't been here since the 18, 19, and so it's been like 3 years. Oh my gosh, so it's really strange. And then you're like, all of the sort of the cream of the crop that are out there right now, you're like, okay, well, where are they now? And it's like, hey, where did we see each other? And like, okay, tell me where you were like 2 years ago. Okay, now I know the trajectory. And it's so incredible. Like everyone had to scramble. Everyone had to sort of like, you either crawled your way through and scraped by and was like, okay, we're just going to, every day is going to be a different challenge. We're gonna the Ross and friends, we're gonna pivot every single day. Like, I don't ever want to hear that again. And I know you've talked about another podcast. Like, if I hear hybrid one more time.
Is it snowing right now?
It is not. It's actually beautiful and sunny. I did get to take a trip to Edmonton, and they did not like me because I brought a blizzard. I was leaving Vancouver with our torrential rains, and that was scary. And then so crushing to see my home province just be completely devastated with the infrastructure. And then it brought a blizzard as it came its way into Alberta. And so there was a total blizzard, but it was actually really nice the rest of the week. So that snow is probably going to be there to stay. So I love it, though. I love Alberta. I love this country, getting to travel across all of the different provinces. And that's one of the best parts about this role. You know that, like, if it wasn't bartending competitions and conferences, that's one of the best things about it is I love when you talk to bartenders. And I know you were one of the ones that did it as well, which you planned your year with conferences and cocktail competitions.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Some work in between.
Yeah. For seeing it's been 3 years, what did you think of Edmonton's cocktail scene? I think it's been spectacularly blown up. I think I was there 2019 because I did the book tour for Great Northern Cocktails. And so I was just floored with the scene there.
You're not wrong. Deservedly so. They are doing great. The community, it's about getting them back to that, having the community come together again and just being allowed to. That's going to continue, but they're doing great things there. And they're really collaborative. Like, it's not, this spot's the best and you can't have another best spot. When we've talked about this, like what makes a really good bartender is like, you don't need to be afraid of others. Like it's sort of that we're going to rise that whole community up and we're going to help each other and push each other to get better. And one thing that they've done that I find is people in Edmonton, the consumers, the guests, they understand, respect it, and they'll travel and go to spots that have a good program. I actually heard a lot, and this was interesting for me, beer halls and those, like there's great beers. There's always going to be craft, breweries opening up, but a lot of those are starting to see a huge increase in cocktail sales. And on certain nights, cocktail sales outpace beer sales. And that was at beer halls.
That's cool. Yeah. I find Edmonton's a lot like Victoria and Calgary's a little bit more like Vancouver. Like, is this that sort of rivalry, big city versus smaller city? And it's always that rivalry of that sort of collaboration. And then who's going to be the best? Is Victoria the best? Is Vancouver the best? Yeah. So let's take it back. Like, as I said in the intro, like you started in the flair industry and you were much bigger than I would ever consider myself. But like your flair experience really was huge and influential, especially in Canada, because Canada has such a small flair community. So let's take us back. How did you get in the industry?
Yeah, so great question, and thanks for having me on your show. Like,
you're very welcome.
I love long-time listener, first time. So I get to now say I've been on this show, and is there a Hall of Fame? Because there's some great people that have been on here. And on your birthday, are you kidding me? Facebook, thank heavens, and all your friends are posting little photos of happy birthday, guy, and I was like, that's hilarious. So we got you some. I'm going to send you out some Maker's Mark socks because you can't look distinguished without some nice Maker's Mark socks, and you get a little wonderful.
My daughter's going to love one of her stuffies in one of those.
Either your cat or your dog is going to be really angry when your kid tries to put it in, or so your dog's perfect. Happy kids, happy wife, happy life.
Exactly.
Exactly. I always try to make sure you get some time with the family. But yeah, to get back to where I started when I was 14 in the hospitality industry. Started at a restaurant and I was a busser, helping be a server assistant. And that was great. My dad was construction. I helped out with that. And that was hard work. And there was no girls. So it was way better in a restaurant and the hustle and bustle. And I definitely like nighttime activities in terms of like work. I prefer night. I don't know. It was just always there. More of a night owl than staying up during the daytime. And so, it was wonderful just having that experience while you're going to school. It was a little bit limited in my duties and got tired of that as it was all just being a server's assistant. So then I started in the kitchen and I worked up from dishwasher, enjoyed that, to prep cook, and then from prep cook to sous chef. Nothing crazy what they were doing today. And, had I known that there was like Red Seal certifications and things going on, I think I would have kept going. I really liked it. I really liked the back of the house, but I did feel a little bit trapped and I wanted that interaction with guests. So I started working in a coffee shop, and I was in a coffee shop for almost 2 years at a ski resort in the Okanagan. And I really loved the interaction with guests. I love learning about coffees and having different flavor profiles with teas and coffees. And, you fall in love with it. And I don't know, we didn't have latte art competitions back then, but again, had there been a creative outlet, maybe I would have stayed doing that. So, and then as soon as I was old enough to get a job in a nightclub, I got a job in a bar as a busser. And I thought, woohoo, I've hit the jackpot. Instead of going out and spending money, I'm actually going out making money and getting paid to party. This is amazing. So I did that. And I was going to school for psychology. And so that was really wonderful. If I saw some, let's call it interesting behavior in the bar, I'd just start asking some questions like, where are you from? Do you have any brothers and sisters? Oh, that's not a good part of town. And oh, you're an only child. Okay. And, you go through and I just would make a little mental profile. And then I'd say, go into class and be studying and be like, so this trait, yeah. Unless I know mouse, there's going to be some really tough road ahead for this individual. So I thought, I'm really applying what I'm learning in school. It's probably a fool's dream. But so I loved it. I really enjoyed the hustle and bustle in the nightclub. Just creating escape for people is what I saw it as, and they weren't here for a long time, so just make them have a really good time. And I loved helping the bartenders and being that bar back and trying to move up. And then I finally started bartending, and that was wonderful. So the whole time I knew, like, and you'll know it, like, it didn't matter. It was like your skills, either your looks or your ability or a combination, and you got a better shift at a better bar. You everything we do in this industry, you put the work in and you get to see it at the end of that shift. Right? That's amazing in terms of, like, if you're building a podcast, you're like, I'm going to grind it out. I'm going to do this. You're like, okay, here's how many followers. But it really takes a long game. Whereas your shift, you get to see how much tips you make. And then you start to get to see how many guests you have coming in every night. Are they, I always heard, if a guest doesn't tip you, but they come back, that's 100% tip. 100%. They're paying your wage and they're in your bar again. And I always knew a busy bar, equal means more and more people will wait outside to get in. Nobody wants to go to a dead bar. So the more you do, the more you invest in yourself, the more you learn, the better you're going to do. So that's where I ended up seeing Dave Simpson in the Okanagan, and he was like, hey, we have a flair bartending class coming up, and you should really take a look at this. And I was like, okay, well, what's flair? And he took a bottle and he threw it behind his back and he caught it. I was like, man, that's so cool. He's like, yeah, want to see something else? I was like, sure. And he did the exact same move. And I was like, cool, got anything else? He's like, no, come to this seminar. Sorry, Dave, but I'll always remember that. And Dave's amazing. He, if you want to talk about one of the top people in Kelowna, and he's got simp syrups that are coming out, which is fantastic over with Jerry Joe. But so Dave, I have to give Dave Simpson credit. He really touched on it, and then that was Scott Young with Extreme Bartending, and I ended up taking that. And so here's the thing, and I think your listeners and yourself will understand, is like, we're going to do a seminar on flair bartending and customer service, but really I just heard flair bartending and 8 hours a day. Okay, when is it? It's on Saturday and Sunday. I was like, I work Saturday and I work Friday. Why the heck? I'm not starting at what time in the morning? So, okay, Saturday happens. The majority of the time we're talking about customer service. We're talking about this. We're talking about engaging guests. And I was like, dude, get to the flair part. I want to flip some stuff. And so I go to work that night and I'm like, man, I don't know I'm going to go back. Like, I'm tired. This is going to go all night. I'm going to get like another 4 hours sleep for the next class to hear about customer service. Like, I don't want to learn to flip some bottles. And that night I made like 50% more tips on just saying hi and being focused on the guest and all these. And I was like, gosh darn it, maybe there's a reason.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah. I'm gonna be so tired. And and then we'd go back and it was so flair heavy the next day, because it's all about flair is a business. And it was a chance. Sorry, I think some notifications are coming up. I was like, if I mute you and turn it down, I won't be able to hear anything. So sorry. And so having them use flair as a business tool, it's a way to engage guests. And that's where I've sort of seen it, is it can go wrong. And that's where I'm like, dude, hey, clown, just give me my drink. Like, there's always going to be those comments. My favorite is when you have a video online and like, enough, just give me my drink. I'm like, you're watching a video, fast forward. Or how about this? You're not even getting a drink. You're watching a video.
Here is an old-fashioned video that takes 2.5 minutes. There you go. There's the link. Just go watch that.
Didn't you get something in one of your fantastic 1 minute cocktails? And you're like, hurry up or something. You're like, I don't know, dude.
Like, what about the rest of us? Yeah, exactly.
Good.
Well, I learned to flair because of being in Australia. Like, we had a bit of a flair thing, and I judged a whole bunch and organized a lot. But I had Dean Sunil's VHS tapes back in the day, and I literally would clear out my living room and get my Flair Co bottle or a Malibu bottle wrapped in duct tape and sit there and do the Dean Sunil's videos, which I wish I had still, because they'd be worth bank now.
Oh my
like
gosh.
they would be worth bank on eBay.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was I had the VHS for Extreme Bartending, and that's how it came out. And then you start collecting and trying to find all these different ones, and getting to know it. So it was great. And I started off. So I went the next day. We learned a lot about flair, and I got to see just this community. And I remember we were practicing, and I did my competition like much. it was too early for me. I was like, man, I don't want to do it. And I got forced into it. And this will be similar for people that are listening about cocktail competitions, like just go. And you mentioned Dean Sunil's. He's one person who said, Micah, go and compete for the sake of competing. And what I took from that was like, you compete because it helps drive you and improve your skills. You're putting yourself out there. So you're like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. Oh my God, my heartbeat, and I don't want to do this. And this is so much work. But then when you come out the other side, you're like, that was great. That was great. And you're a better bartender. You're a better person for it when you're applying yourself. So, and that's what I interpreted from, compete for the sake of competing. It's also driving your craft, right? It's your community as a whole. And you can contest to this, and seeing so many is like, when you're meeting those people, it was great. I remember doing the Big Apple bartending competition in New York City, and we're backstage, we're getting things prepped. And Tom died.
Wait a second, what year was that?
2000, was it 10? No, earlier, would be earlier.
2007?
Could have been, yeah, could have been.
Because I was there doing the cocktail competition because it was at the Javits Center.
There you go.
And I got up to compete, and Christian Delpiche got up to compete for the Flair competition at the same time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why are you guys watching me? Like, you shouldn't be watching me doing this cocktail. It was me and Tad Caducci. And I'm like, go watch Christian Delpiche. Go watch Christian Delpiche. And then I went out with Ken Hall and Robin Clausen to Milk and Honey for the first time. Fantastic. And I was like a 27-year-old kid. Like, I was like only been in Canada for like 8 months. And I was like, how am I in New York City and going to Milk and Honey with Ken Hall, Robin Clausen? Dean gave up his seat for me at Milk and Honey because he went off to Coyote Ugly because he was doing that country TV thing at the time.
I remember that, yeah.
And so I was just like, this is an incredible experience. But yeah, that was you look at some of the photos of me back then, I really, really wish I still look like that.
The crazy thing is your accent hasn't changed, right? So
no, I'd be a very average looking Canadian if I didn't have an accent.
So one of the great things that Tom said, we're backstage and Tom Dyer's taping. I was like, oh, why do you do that? And he taught me how to tape bottles up a little bit better. And what you're doing is you're using electrical tape, you're taping around the bottles so that when you're juggling and flipping them, the spout doesn't fly off inadvertently in your grip. And so that was really good. And just all these little things. And what I learned is the community of Flair bartenders is so welcoming and so helpful. And they're like, okay, we're at a competition. I'll help you. I want to beat you. But absolutely I want to beat you, but I'll help you. And if I beat you on your best day, I'm better than you. Right? You weren't feeling well or your shoulder's sore. Rats. There's always that, I didn't beat them at their best. And I loved that. So that was interesting. One of my favorites is Tim Flippy Morris. He's the most entertaining bartender that I've seen, and I love it. And, he started doing stand-up comedy. And he goes,
oh, really?
Yeah. And he goes, this is not for me. And he goes, this is not enjoyable. Like the whole welcoming community part. No, they're ruthless backstage. And I was like, oh, okay. So I remember him talking about it. He was like, I did it for a little bit, and then it's not for me. So, but he's one of my favorites just to see. And it's funny when you start going along, like Christian Delpiche was 4-time world champion, and he was incredible. And it was someone I idolized in going through it. And, when he stopped being champion, it's because he let his brother started, he's like, my brother's even better than me. So now Roto, is king of it. And so that was the time. And when I got into Flair bartending in Canada, you talk about it, and it was really infant in terms of what was doing, but I wasn't the first, right? Like there was Scott Young who was working at the Roxy, but there was Mark Mattel, one of the top Flair bartenders, in the world. And he was from Canada. I was like, holy smokes, this is awesome. Like Marcin Delecky was another one. And they both happened to work at the Roxy Burger and the Roxy in Vancouver. So for me, I was like, I'm falling in love with this place called the Roxy. What is it? And it's pretty wild when you think what we've gone through. I went down, it would have been the 15th anniversary party of the Roxy. I think they just turned 31 or 32 now. I waited outside because I couldn't get in. But I drove for 4 hours, and we were like, we want to go to this party. Dave Simpson got in because he knew the right people, and they're like, we don't have enough room. And I was outside, and I was just that lost puppy, like, wow, the party inside's crazy. Like, you're like, hey, have you ever stood outside of a lineup? Yeah, I've done that, and it was pretty wild. And then I went back for the 16th, and that was really fun. And I started working there as well, and it was one of the top bars in Western Canada, and arguably still is. So hopefully when we're able to get back to what we're doing, and they've always focused on live music. It's always creating a wonderful experience for the guest. And when I worked there for almost 10 years, there was a sign on our downstairs staff area upstairs. It said "To Disneyland." And it was that mindset of like, upstairs is the party, downstairs, hey, take your face off, blah, blah, blah. But upstairs, you're a character, and you make sure people have a good time. And I love that. And they still have that. Like, Sasha's still there. He's the general manager, and Vic's still, a key component. And you'll see him at the door, and the staff there keep that alive, and they keep going. And it's been really great to see. And so those ones are always huge influences being there. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't say about Chuck Mack. Chuck McIntosh is, come on, bottle.
I was gonna bring up Chuck because of Bottle Slingers. Bottle Slingers previews and the videos were just fantastic, and I've never met anyone who's actually got banned from the US for multiple years for just trying to take some DVDs to Vegas.
Right?
I think he's allowed back to the US now. I think
so.
the ban has been a thing, but I think last time I talked to him was about 5 years ago, and he still wasn't allowed.
Yeah.
So how did you make the transition away from Flair? And obviously I feel like Flair is a very customer service centric element of bartending that I think a lot of bartenders in this day and age could sort of learn from and build from. Because a lot of people, like, the hardcore cocktail mixologists, I'm going to do the abbreviators, they go, oh, well, Flair's like, yeah, give me my drink. But like, it all came out of Jerry Thomas. Like, Jerry Thomas was the godfather of both elements of bartending, high-end cocktails as well as Flair. And there's been a massive shift in the last couple of years, I know, from competitions that Flair competitions have definitely started focusing on the cocktails at the end, because like during the late 90s, early 2000s, like no one really cared about what the cocktail tasted like in a Flair comp. It was really just about the performance. And if the cocktail was good, awesome. I'm not drinking shit. I'm going to get a good cocktail at the end of this performance. But I know that sort of started changing mid 2000s, sort of focusing on cocktails. And then you see like, is it Dario Domo? He made the transition from world-class Flair tender, which he still is, to high-end cocktail bartender at Mr. Coco's in Vegas. Mm-hmm. And now he's sort of still in Vegas's bar scene as a high-end cocktail bartender. So how did you make that transition?
No, that's a great one. And it really, for me, we saw a shift. So I had the pleasure of being the #1 Canadian bartender for 2 years in a row. And to me, that meant a lot, because if you looked at our landscape and who we're competing against, like, and I started to see it when you start to get those higher ups, like when you start to get in the top 10 in the world, that top 13 in the world, it was really like people, oh, what was your job? Was it bartending or was it Flair bartending competitions? Because there was enough money that you could make being the top. Yeah. If you were the top like 5 or top 3 consistently, you could go around the world and do Flair bartending competitions. So then 2008 was the market crash. And funding and these extravagant, like we had with Ken Hall working with the Flair Bartenders Association, they had $100,000 as the prize purse for, and they broke that down to categories, which they did really well. Is okay, it costs everyone to come down here. So let's give a little bit to the rookies. Let's do an amateur, let's do an advanced, and let's do a pro division, right? And so main money's in the pros, but there was something for everybody. I thought they did it really well in that regard. And so that money was there, and they worked with different spirit brands, and that was, hey, this is really rolling really well. That was a hard shift. And when it came back, we didn't have that same budgets. And what we were finding, and why I could say like Flair, I don't know in North America if it'll reach the same amount or level. It's going to take some time if it does, because the money is in cocktail competitions. Now, here's the reason why. If you look at what you're doing as a Flair bartender or as a guest watching a bartender, they're flipping these bottles, you're like, that's really cool. It's very visual. Cool. I want to try that drink. But it doesn't always mean the drink was really good, right? And so we had to blend that. But then if you go, here's these bartenders, there's 100 bartenders in competition, and they're all making a cocktail and they all have the recipe. Well, that brand now gets 100 recipes rather than look at all these bartenders flipping bottles and people going, that's really cool, but I can't do that. Everyone can follow a recipe. And so all of a sudden the brand money is in cocktail competitions. Will you see flair competitions come back? It's organic. It'll be really interesting to see, but I don't think those budgets will. And I just see it being like, if I was a brand and investing money, it would be in a cocktail competition. Having said that, to your point, what you're bringing up is like, we are seeing it come in, and there's flair bartending, which is almost two categories. It's exhibition style, so juggling when you're doing multiple objects, when there's a little bit of liquid in the bottle, and it's really intricate, hitting things to the beat, all choreographed, just like if it was like figure skating, right? And it's all choreographed similar to that. And then there's working flair. Working flair is, I don't know how full that bottle is. I don't know what objects I'm going to need depending on that. And I'm going to do really short, quick movements, sometimes really flashy. It could be a twirl of the spoon, a twist of the shaker. And to your point, flair came about from, Jerry Thompson, the Blue Blazer. We had a contest that Ken started, and it was like exactly what you've recalled correctly is flair bartending competitions started to get into the mixology and the cocktail and the craft of it. And so we had in Las Vegas a Blue Blazer competition, and it was about the cocktail with flair. And that was so that Blue Blazer, that fire, that flair, that's where the whole flair bartending came from. And that was, it's a showpiece. And you see that, and even in today's day and age where we're doing tableside cocktails. You go to the Connaught Bar, you can have that trolley come out. If you go to a steakhouse, many places have tableside salads, Caesar salads, steak, how they're cut. Those are all the art of it. So you're exactly right. And you can see Zach in Toronto. He has Cocktails and Dreams, and he does a lot of virtual training, and everything's online. And he does a great job of just showcasing and showing, hey, we're going to do suction the can. We're going to do, our pyramid pour where there's a multi-pour. I think that I wish everyone needs to get off the whole rainbow shooters. I'm not going to lie. That's my least favorite. Someone's getting grenadine.
Just grenadine. Just
grenadine. This is terrible. Don't make these.
And when it comes to functional flair, like at the end of the day, everything tastes better drop poured. So Let's get into Maker's Mark and the Diplomat role that you've taken on. It's only been about 6 months.
Yeah, so I started in July. July is when I started. And this role, so before the pandemic, after the Roxy, I was working at Gateway Casinos. And we went from 13 locations to 31 in the 5 years.
Wow.
I was beverage development manager, and we would take on, it was great. There was a super fun team in the corporate team when I joined, and we really were focusing on growing and building our brands. And if you think in the gaming community, all the money's on the gaming side, and you're not going to get away from that. But where there was drivers is what we started to see in Las Vegas as well, which food and entertainment were really where you're getting some new business. And so it was great to work with them. And that really helped me in terms of seeing operations on a really high above scale. But also we were growing so rapidly that we didn't have a lot of pieces. So I'm having to build those into it and work with our teams on, we were just like Navy SEALs and just like, okay, what needs to get done? And here, and you're a jack of all trades. And I got to meet really great people across the country as we opened up those locations. Of course, then we're all put on pause essentially for, casino was really hit pretty badly. And so this opportunity came up, and I've been waiting for something. I love the West Coast. You're in Victoria, and you're like, I just can't find my way out of here. I love it so much. Yeah. But what am I doing here? Should I be here? Like, it's a great spot. And it's one of those ones that I love the West Coast. And whether that's San Diego, San Francisco, Seattle, or Vancouver, I love the West Coast of North America. And so traveling out east all the time for work, the longer flight, the time change, it was really exhausting when you're putting into it. And Ontario is the biggest market. So of course we're going to be doing a lot of work in Ontario, and there's amazing community. Like you talk about everything going on, like Toronto and Ontario in general, there's so much really good talent, and a lot of the talent from the West goes to the East, and we cross over all the time. So I just wasn't it was something that I got really tired and was getting burned out. So the opportunity to work just in Western Canada was really interesting. So I was hearing about different offers and different brands, and this one was the very first time I heard about just Western Canada and working for a prestigious brand like Maker's Mark. How incredible was this? I got to know, in my career, I've had some really fantastic influences from brand ambassadors, whether that be, Jeffrey Myers, Matt Jones, who was Flair bartending. I know him from before, and get recognized international scale. Like, I still remember Matt with the Flair, and then I was like, he's an amazing whiskey chef. Are you kidding me?
Perfect smooth transition.
Yeah,
grow a big ass beard, wear flannel. Transition done.
Yeah, James Neal, you see, Kevin Brownlee. I've seen Jay Jones. There's so many people who had that ambassador role and do some really good things. And so it was something I was interested in, something that I think many of us are like, dude, you have the coolest role. Like when Philip Duff was talking about it and Simon Ford, and, and like there's so many cool things with it. But it's a lot of work. But I think connecting with the community and allowing to give back to the community, and by creating some interesting product knowledge, experience events, and that's how you can sort of create it into something that, hey, I get to do a really neat role, but how can I give back to the community, and how can I, increase the knowledge and the passion for it so that it really is a profession, right? So, taking that on, I was really fortunate. We did 5 rounds of interviews in several months. And I was like, man, I know there's lots of people going for this. If I don't get it, that's, there's someone who's going to be really good at this. And every time I was like, no, I'm really good. I've done this. And I kept going through, and I felt really lucky. I'll tell you that. And I think I told you in person, like, I really appreciate, because what I learned is it's along the way. It's not 1 or 2 things that happened, and that's why I was in the position to be accepted into the role. It's all my experience this whole time when we're telling stories is like, this person had an influence, and this person, and this, and this, and this, and it built me up to be. It's within me, and it's my character, and I really enjoy going out and connecting with the community and representing a great brand like Makers. And I'm only able to do that because of people in my life who have influenced me to be a really good sort of hospitality person. So for me, it feels an honor and a privilege. And now I just get to take this ball and run with it and do some great things and make it my own.
Well, I remember years ago, Bill Samuels Jr. saying that he'll never do, because I know that being part of Beam Suntory and being part of the bourbon community, like there's a lot of bourbon out in the market, and we only see a fraction of it in Canada. I remember him saying that he only ever make Maker's Mark. Like Maker's Mark he'll never do a special bottle or single barrels or like go down the road a lot of it. And then like a couple of years later, 46 came out. and now the single barrel, and I know that Harry, who you've met, my right hand guy at Clive's, he actually got a bottle of the single barrel, the last bottle at the recent whiskey release as well, and he spent like $900 in 2 days on whiskey, which was insane. I'm like, my wife would kill me. I'm glad that he's a single guy and he can go and spend $900 without being questioned, but my wife would kill me. But how do you feel about, like, because Maker's Mark's been quiet over the last couple of years. You've been the first diplomat, I would say, in 5 to 7 years, maybe even longer.
Yeah. So Ray Daniels was that was within the portfolio, and he deals with Beam Suntory's whiskey brands and bourbon brands, and Maker's Mark was included with that. And he did a great job going nationally, talking about all the different fantastic worlds of whiskeys and bourbons. And then James Neal was doing, so our luxury brands and scotches, and does a great job representing those great brands across the country as well. And so you're right, though, like Maker's Mark, really, they almost ran out of liquid, right? Yeah. Like that's, you're going to talk about like, why was it not really known very much? It was almost, they were running out. Like you talk about the brand itself, like Bill Samuels Sr. started in 1953. They sold their first bottle in 1958. And then to your point, they didn't have a different release into 2010. Yeah. And you're like, well, how did that happen? Like almost 60 years of you just, we make one thing and one thing only, right? Like, yeah. And they were consistent, and they had an audience, and they had a consumer base, and they were like, this is really good. And they enjoyed it. And so it grew organically out of Kentucky into the States, and now into a global brand. And so they didn't have, it wasn't like, well, hey, we're seeing these different trends with flavored vodkas. Okay, we should do a flavored one. And we're seeing different flavored profiles of now like whiskeys and scotches and all these different cask strengths. And like, what should we do? And we're like, we are selling barrels and we don't have the liquid. So if you remember the story, it was we were at 45% alcohol, right? And we're going to dilute down to 43%, right? And by that 2%, we're going to get a 6% yield increase globally, and we'll be able to meet the demand. And people are like, the hell you will.
Yeah. People are like, nope, not going to do it.
To speak to, Bill Samuel Sr., he's like, don't screw up my whiskey. And he's like, if Bill was supposed to put it at 43%, then it would be at 43. It's at 40 proof. It's at 90 proof. You leave it there, right? And they're like, okay, but you may see outages and you may see that price go up. And so they knew there's a very loyal market for Maker's Mark. And so in Canada, we didn't have stock. And you're like, that was a rare bottle. And you're like, oh, okay. You want to talk about scarcity? Like, there just wasn't the juice. And so they couldn't make it. So in that time, I think it took them about 6 years, they increased the still. And when I say increase the still, no, they duplicated it. They replicated it, having the same company that made the first still. Let's have them go ahead and replicate. We need to make another. But if we change the size of the still, plates, if we change anything, if we change like, hey, can we use a faster yeast? Can we use a different ferment? Because can we go through the process? Can we streamline it? Do we have to go through our doubler and our column still? Do we have to do that? Or can we do a faster process? We're like, if we change anything, we already learned you're going to change like 2%. And people were freaking out. Okay, let's not. So it took them time. It took them time to increase their production, but through replicating the exact same format of what they're doing. So every bottle of Makers tastes like every bottle of Makers you always known. We didn't adjust they didn't adjust the mash build or change anything. So over that time, it took some time, but now there's that liquid. And so that's where my role, I believe, really came into play, is we have enough now to talk about it again. It's no longer needs to be within a portfolio. They're still owned by, Beam Suntory, this fantastic company that really does care about the brands. I feel very lucky that Maker's Mark is in there because it's not public traded. So it's not about the dollars and the investors. It's about the integrity of the brands. And if something's selling, then don't change it. It's selling well.
Going back to the stills, people, I always try and tell the story when it comes to like Scotch distilleries and stuff like that. When they change up the goose's neck, they take a full 3D scan now. And when they replace it, they'll go through and put dings back into the goose's neck. So it's exactly the same as the one they just replaced, because it will eventually run out. Yeah. But yeah, like I think Bill Samuels Sr. was up here a number of years ago. Bill Samuels Jr. was up here a number of years ago doing a seminar. And he was saying, and I still use this for my consulting, that every time they do a new batch, they go into a room with like 10 people and go, good dunk. This is Maker's Mark. Like, this is the one we have on the market right now. And they taste a whole bunch of them. And then they'll pick and they're like, oh, this is the Maker's Mark. These ones need a little bit long time. This one needs like a little bit of softer notes. But this particular batch right here is Maker's Mark. And then they all agree on it. And then that becomes Maker's Mark, which I think is a phenomenal way of doing it. And I think that people assume that all liquor brands do this. But a lot of the time, it's one person who makes the decision that it still tastes the same, and then they roll it out. And small, especially for small craft distilleries here in BC. You know how crazy it is right now in BC. It's something that I don't think gets done enough. It's a bit of more of an echo chamber, and and people have their friends come over and tell them it's great, and then they release it and it's not so great. But that's a whole different episode.
You got it. And when I was learning, like the bung, like that wood is actually changed because they're tapping into those barrels more often than almost any company, because they want to make sure that the taste profile is there. And when they're hand rotating these in the rack house, they have to start for Makers. It has to be three summers in the top rack. So you get that real interaction with the wood. And then they start rotating in the rack house. And you talk about like innovation and science, like they're looking at, okay, if we have to make another rack house, well, how do we make it so that the rack house that we originally have is the same? And they're like looking at putting temperature controls so that the second rack house would actually have the temperature controls like what's it in our first one. I was like, that's some pretty impressive.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and you talk about like we work on consistency. And Denny Potters is a master distiller and plant operator, but to your point, he leads 25 distillers on the team, and they all go through and like, is this what the taste should be? Right? I'm so fortunate. I just represent the amazing work that they do at the distillery. That's my role, and so they produce some really great things, and I think it's taken for granted because you're right. The whiskey category is growing rapidly still. When I'm out in the market and talking and seeing the different products, Maker's Mark is just one that I just have to reintroduce to people because it's almost like there's so much out there, and you go, oh right, I love this stuff. And so that's where I find that I'm having a lot of joy in just reconnecting people with something. They go, man, I totally forgot. I really do like this. And they come
I haven't had this in years. Like,
it's exactly it, you know, and that price point on it, it's that one step up, and we're seeing premiumization. And when you're talking about staff out there, we all know there's labor shortages, and it's working smarter, not harder. So it's using your ability to go, hey, this is a wheated bourbon. It has really wonderful flavors of vanilla, caramel, oakiness. It's not bitter. It doesn't have a rye component that's really flavoring it. And that's what Bill wanted to create, and how Maker's Mark was started, is really burning the recipe and rewriting it, right? So he created that style. And so it's getting people introduced back to it and go, oh, this is really good, you know? And the price is there. And like when we saw different vodka brands or someone get bought by a celebrity, you're like, well, wait, why is it double the price now?
Yeah.
And you're like, so could it have gone up? I swear they could charge more for it, but I think they've done it a service where it's like, no, we're going to charge a fair price for it. It takes a lot of, it's small batch, it's handmade, you know, there's some, you know, production process going on, but there's so much that is done by hand, tasted, sampled, checked, all of it done by hand, rotated by hand with barrels. So there's so much love that goes into it. And that's something that you can't replicate in just having it automated.
Let's talk about by hand, because the Maker's Mark bottle is obviously the most famous bottle when it comes to the hand dipped red wax. And they've done a whole bunch of different colored red wax depending on the event, or like I know Independence Day, they do blue, white, red and all that sort of stuff. Talk us through that, because I think a lot of people believe that it's a special machine or something, but it is literally like just a bunch of people like dipping wax.
It's a really cool thing. I totally, like, you're bang on with this, because, you know, you joke like, how many bottles do you sell? You know, when I heard like we do one fermentation gets us about 25 barrels. And I was like, wow, what? That's okay. You have a lot more makers around the world than 25. Like, but Micah, we do that fermentation process like 25 times a day. You're like, oh, okay. I got you now. But yeah, on the production, it's still done like, people check the bottle, right? So they check it, they make sure the label's on, they make sure the bottle. So this is a nice one with the private select that I picked up here in Alberta. But yeah, BC just had their private select, and we can talk a little bit about that if you want to know what's a little bit different about it. But it's wax dipped. So someone's actually taking it, dipping it into hot wax, twisting, and then letting it sit, and those drips come down. When I started learning about that, because it's so iconic, I was like, what about this can no other company do, right? And I thought maybe the color, you know, because I've seen other companies do this. Okay, it's the color, and you talked about the red. No, it's not the red. So what it is, it's the tendrils. It's those drips that come down. No other company can create those on purpose. We've created them by purpose, and it's really unique to Makers. And I thought that's really cool. And so I said, okay, it's done by hand, right? And so Bill Samuels created a liquid, and his wife Marjorie said, okay, Bill, wonderful liquid. You create everything inside of it. I do everything outside. So every dollar you put into it, Shawn, I'm going to spend $1 on everything else around the facility, around the bottle, the packaging. So she decided on the package, the hand label, the hand cut label, the font, everything was it, the stamp, the logo, everything that's there, she created, and she did a great job. Margie was super impressive. And you talk about celebrating her. She's in the, you know, the Bourbon Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
You know, a huge integral part of it, and why people go, oh, that looks awesome, you know, and it's very iconic on a shelf. And so they were like, we're going to hand dip this. And Bill's like, we're not going to do that. Like, we're doing this, Bill. And I could just see this conversation. You're like, and then you know who won, because there's a wax. She won. Absolutely. So it's done by hand. And I said, like, how does this happen? Like, how fast? You're like, how many bottles can you dip in a minute? What's the record? It was like 23 or 26, something like that.
Wow.
You're right. But here's the thing. They do personality profiles at the distillery. And when you're getting a job, and like you might be really interested in working the dipping line. You're really set for it. It's going to be, you're not going to be numbed out by it, but you can only do it for half an hour at a time before you have to go to another activity. Otherwise, you will, just like us bartenders, wear out your body movements on just over and over in repetitive motion. So it's really cool. So yeah,
that's awesome. I want to get onto something personal right now, but I don't want to take up too much more of your time. But you're one of the most positive people that I've met in the industry. And when you get to our age, and I'm going to completely understand, like, I'm going to admit to this, and I'm sure a lot of people who are listening right now or watching are going to go, yeah, Shawn's a jaded bitch. But how do you stay, like, for young bartenders who are coming through the ranks, you've obviously, your career has evolved from bussing and dishwashing and cafes and stuff like that through the flair world and now into a brand ambassador position. How do you stay positive, so fucking positive, and I'm going to say so fucking positive, as well as keeping that drive going when you start getting, because it does wear on you, like, don't get me wrong, I love and I'm grateful that I get to travel and visit and do conferences and stuff, but it does wear on you, like 3 o'clock wake ups and going to the airport at 5 o'clock in the morning and stuff like that. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but how do you personally stay as positive as you do?
I think it's a great one, and something we've heard. I hear it right now, and tell me, your take on it as well, because you hear this as well. But like, people like, I've always been told, like, you leave your stuff at the door, right? Mm-hmm. So when you go into shift, like, talked about Disneyland, and you can talk about the Roxy, and but like, that's where it was like, you leave your stuff at the door. There's Micah with bills, like, car doesn't start, and this and that. I'm fighting with this. Doesn't matter. I get to now play a character and just have fun. And so doing that was a break, honestly, from your life. And like, I don't have to worry about it. And then in 8 hours or 10 hours or whatever it is, then I have to
15 hours.
Then I have to go back to it and hopefully have some money to solve one of my problems, right? Or have some clarity and be like, look, I had a break to think about it, and now I'm back. And so you talk about, I know you went through this, and we talk about our why. Like, why are you doing it? And for me, I have to remember that working in this industry, for me, what filled me up, like, hugs don't pay bills. So I like hugs, but they don't pay bills. I definitely like money. But when someone said, Micah, you've absolutely made our night. Thank you so much. Dude, I'm like, yeah, that drove me. And so I don't just apply that to, like, my guest is just different now. Sometimes it's the new consumer and I'm doing a sampling, or we're doing a tasting or a spirited dinner or something like that. And those are my guests. And then other times it's the frontline staff. And Vance Campbell had an influence on me. He said, Micah, your front line is your bottom line. And your frontline staff, invest in them, and good companies invest time and money into them, knowing that if they take care of them, they'll take care of their guests, and that will lead a really healthy bottom line. And so I just want to take that sort of knowledge and then what I get fulfilled. And if I have those bartenders, those managers, those owners that say, hey, Micah, that was really great. Thank you so much. You really invested and I got a lot out of it. That fills me up, because then I added value, and so there was a term I had from different sales from running a different company, and it was fan-a-fit. Find a need and fill it. Think about a guest coming in. Okay, it's your birthday. Think about a guest coming in. You come in with a party, blah, blah, and the staff don't acknowledge you say happy birthday. And you're like, am I even here? Like, what is going on? People want to be acknowledged. And so your job, my job as a server or bartender, was to find a need. Why did you, hey, what brought you out tonight? Oh, I'm just visiting Victoria. I'm from here, blah, 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 I'm looking for a couple spots. Okay, wonderful. Your dialogue with that guest. Hey, I'm going to make you a wonderful cocktail. Welcome to Clive's. I'm going to have, like, here's what we do. And here's some suggestions. I want you to go see this person at go see Matt Majid at Win Cries Mary. Go see Kelsey Mitchell at, Cafe Mexico. And all of a sudden they're like, wow, that's fantastic. I got to know more about it. I found a great spot. And guess what? They're probably going to come back to you for more suggestions and another great cocktail, because they already enjoyed it and you were the source to the source. And so finding a need, asking questions, what brought people down here, right? Like, oh, we're
Right.
out for a sporting game. Oh, I'm here for a business. I'm here on a date. Okay, let's make sure I watch those. I do the silent service, right? I come up, just not be obtrusive, be there, but be in the background, and so finding a need and filling it. And that's when I find that you can really touch into, if you serve them on why they came out and you fulfill that need, they go, that was the best. Right.
Yeah, I'm contemplating. Harry's been on my back at like next round of coasters we're doing. We're not, because every time that someone comes in, we write on the back of the coaster where to go next and that sort of thing. So we're probably just going to get a list of bars and restaurants you have to go to on the back of the coaster for Clive's. My hotel may go, hey, we don't really want people like leaving Clive's, but like there's a lot of times where I kick people out, and this is going to sound horrible, but I kick people out because they're only in Victoria for one night. And I'm like, I love the fact that you're here enjoying us, but like, if you're a cocktail nerd, like you should really go visit Clark and Company. You really should go visit Wind Cries Mary. Like, don't like, you can spend the one night here. I would love that, and I love toasting you. But I was like, but you can go and see some fantastic bartenders if it's your last night in Victoria, or you're only here for one night, and really enjoy Victoria as a whole instead of just little Clives. Like, I could serve you 5 cocktails, you'll go back upstairs to your hotel room and go to sleep. Or you can have one cocktail here, one cocktail at Clark and Company, one cocktail at Courtney Room, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and you can incentivize that to have them come back. And I think what's important when we're talking about the business of it is it's reciprocated. And if it's not reciprocated, guess who's not on the list? Right? Like, we all work with a bartender, and just like bartenders, the guest wants to go somewhere where they know somebody, right? Oh, hey, I know. Hey, I'm here to see this person at Clark and Co. Blah, blah, Shawn sent me. Okay, they get a little bit better service. Doesn't mean they get something for free every time, but they just get acknowledged and like, hey, Shawn was a great guy. Blah blah. And guess what? They're going to send someone that comes to their spot first. You got to go to Claude's, and so it's that circle, and it builds everyone up.
So what's the plan for the next 6 months? I know that you're 6 months into the role. I know with 2022, everything's sort of reopening up. I'm sure there's a trip to Kentucky planned sometime in the new year for sure for you, because I know that you have to go down and learn how to dip bottles so that we can start doing dipping bottles again, because it's one of my favorite things with Maker's Mark seminars is like hand dipping stuff. And of course everybody starts dipping their hats or their phone cases or something like that. They everybody dips something. So what's the plan for the next 6 months for you?
So we get back to traveling. We're all hoping that international travel, we're starting to, and as a company, Beam Suntory is very cognizant of the health and safety of, everyone. And so it's like, do we really need to travel internationally? What's that like? So that's starting to open up more. So we're very excited. And just like everyone, we know that, everyone can't wait to go somewhere, like, oh my God, doesn't matter almost where, let's go. So yes, I'm excited. We have whiskey festivals coming up, right? So Victoria Whiskey Fest is coming up in January. And I'm so excited to be there and to be a part of it, because before I was just an attendee, and now I get to create some really memorable experiences for people. So
I got big plans.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All the good key people do, and we'll be there supporting it. So I can't wait. So a lot of whiskey fests are coming up, and that's going to continue. Hopefully, we'll do in more provinces, do more events as they open up. We've proven it. If you have a hockey arena with a bunch of people, we can definitely have some events of our own that are hospitality based and community based. And so it's continuing that flow. I do get to go down to Kentucky for 2 weeks, and
nice.
Yeah, so I actually look forward to again connecting with so many people we've seen virtually for so long, and to get to be there and feel it all again. And so that'll be really great. So festivals and a lot of really cool sort of working. I get to be the tour guide, right? So as we bring people down for this private select, which is creating your own Maker's Mark recipe, essentially, with in a barrel. And now we get to go down and sample that, create that, it ages, and then you can come back and later in the year it gets released. And that's what the BC liquor stores did for their 100th anniversary with that private select. And, they sold out. It was like one per person. Well, great. There's only 249 bottles at most that can come out of a barrel, so it didn't last very long. So yeah, the Harry, and I had to fight tooth and nail just to get one. I was like, I work for the brand.
Always the way.
Come on, Adele. Yeah, well, I need something better for BC. Yeah. So come on. So There will be a lot of those. We're looking at creating a lot of different experiences across the provinces and bringing the community back together. So what can people expect? It's working with bartenders and celebrating bartenders again. And what we were finding, I was talking to you, months ago about it, was like, do you think people have been watching online for so long that they're now don't need bartenders and they're mixing their own? There's so much information out there. I was talking to Trevor Kayleys, who's an amazing person. So props to Trevor. He was like, the bartender can't bull poop anybody. Like, hey, do you know about a paper plane? Oh yeah, I know that one. Like, no, do you realize that guest, they made that. They researched it on Google. It's the only drink they were making for the last 15 months. They know more about it. They've tried different drinks. Like, you as a bartender, you know too many spirits, too many wine, too many foods to zero in. I was like, they know it way harder than you. Training is going to be super important, right? Training is going to be super important. And how can I help our community? How can I help businesses when traditionally we have January, February, March being slower months? Like, this holiday season, it's going to be great, a little bit easier. It's tougher this time, as you know, staff in certain places and just working smarter, not harder, because we're already tapped out. But what can we do to make sure that our first quarter or opening up the year starts really strong for accounts? And that's for me to just come in and let's create some really cool guest experience. Let's create engagement. Let's create some training. Let's get us ready to have a really successful and enjoyable community. And that includes the guests. So.
Awesome. Yeah, no, Michelle and I met yesterday, so we've got a whole bunch. We got 4 days worth of stuff sorted out at different venues and the usual stuff. So where can people find you on Instagram and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So I'm on Instagram, Makers Mark Canada West is the best way. YouTube will be sort of set up. I really haven't had much into it, but we want to create some cocktails. There's some great people up there, such as yourself, creating them. Likable cocktails is great as well. So haven't done as much with that terms of that platform, but Facebook as well. Micah Dew Makers and Makers Mark Canada West. That's the best one to find me at. That's.
Well, man, I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I know that we sort of bounced around a few different dates and times this week and was sort of trying to fit your schedule in with everything that you're doing in Edmonton and Calgary. But I love hanging out with you. So I'm looking forward to January because we got some cool stuff coming in January.
Well, I really appreciate having me on and sharing with your community because I'm a user of you. I always like listening to it, and I just want to say thanks, Shawn, because what you do matters.
I really appreciate that.
And I'm always loving the quick post shifts. Sometimes there's long. Sometimes you have some great people on here: John Szyminski, Stephen Beaumont. Duff. Like you've had some great guests, and you're always really good on just having really interesting conversations, and you're really easy to talk to. And that's what I love, people coming on your show and just sharing, and you always bring out the best, and you're wonderful. So thank you so much, and happy birthday, my friend.
Thanks, buddy. I'll chat to you really soon.
Sounds good.
Thanks. Bye.